Morning, Rob. How are you?
Morning, Paul. Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Sun shining behind you and Darren. And
Morning, Rob.
Morning, Darren.
How's life for you in Derby?
Yeah, it's a bit overcast this morning, but it's very, very busy. You know what it's like in Derby. We're always on the go.
Is the traffic levels getting back to normality?
Yeah, we're about 75% back to where we were in November 2019 now. That was the rates from a couple of weeks ago. Certainly in the morning coming into the office, I'm in the office 2 or 3 days a week now. The traffic queues are developing, so yeah.
And possibly get a bit busier as of today now.
Yeah, I mean, since the relaxation, when the schools went back, we saw kind of an increase in traffic then. And then when the hairdressers opened, we saw another increase. And I think we're anticipating another increase now. The nighttime economy is opening today. So, yeah. So,
what are you going to talk to us about today? School enforcement, it's really a passionate sort of topic of yours. I know you sort of led the way in sort of increasing sort of school enforcement. So.
Yeah, well, I put a few slides together just to go through to tell you what we did done in Derby to improve compliance outside schools, the school gate parking, the historical problem where the councillors' post bags were full by 85% of their post bag school parking problems, and we'd kind of exhausted everything in Derby from engineering, education, and enforcement, and we'd still not kind of got to the bottom of driver behaviour change. That includes foot patrols, camera cars, but we still couldn't achieve that driver change. So I just wanted to talk about what we did with one of our contractors, SEA, and developed a product with them, which proudly won us an award at the British Parking Awards in 2020. But more importantly, the actual driver behaviour change that we've achieved as a result of the Safe Haven Outside Schools product. So that's what I just wanted to have a chat about, really.
Okay, well, you take it away. We'll share the screen, get your slides up.
Yeah, so I think one thing to bear in mind that the Safe Haven Outside Schools project, it's not just about enforcement. It's got different threads and different strands of aims. So to improve clean air outside schools, the parents will often turn up in the winter months, sit in the car, arrive half an hour early, and have the engine running, polluting the air outside the schools. It's aimed at active travel, encouraging cycling and walking, which is really, really important. And the presence of a camera outside of school, whilst the primary purpose isn't for antisocial behaviour or crime and disorder, the actual presence of a camera kind of improves safety and the perception of public safety in the area. And of course, one thing it also does, it enforces the parking restrictions outside the schools, namely the yellow zigzags, which are the crossing point for the children outside the school gate. So it's really important to remember that it's not just about enforcement. This project's aimed at delivering several different strands, but all aimed at making that haven outside the school much safer than it was before. And traditionally, we used to use a camera car to enforce outside schools, and the camera car would often get rain on the lens. It would sometimes mean it just captured the shot there and then. It wasn't a contextualised shot of what was happening at the time, which meant the evidence compiled wasn't always that compelling. Appellants could write to the council and say they were waiting to give way and our car overtook them. And whilst we thought that was, didn't have any credit or merit, we often found that difficult to disprove because the camera car then proceeded to another school and it just got that snapshot. The evidence wasn't the best. So we looked at what we needed and this is what we come up with. So bearing in mind that the images from the camera car weren't always perfect in the context, we can look at the image on the next slide, which is an image from our Safe Haven Outside School camera. It's a HD image. It's from a camera which is just pan and tilt. You'll see the grey areas are the privacy zone, so that means the operator can't look at things that they're not entitled to look at. The camera can't go left and right. It can only look at the parking restrictions in place. It's all very open and transparent. We repainted all the lines beforehand so we can see the zigzags nice and clear. The regulatory signage is in shot. So it's all about trying to promote the fact that the zigzags are there and they need complying with. It's not about catching people. And we've gone above and beyond here to try and make it as clear to drivers as we can. But you can see here that the image shows a yellow van parked and the doors open and it's on the zigzags. The camera car here will drive past that and just catch that snapshot. The operator watches this in real time, will see what's happening in real time, and then make a conscious decision as to whether or not a contravention occurred. And that image can be recorded for up to 3 minutes. It might be 30 seconds. This restriction is very strict. As soon as you stop, a contravention occurs. But we have to use our kind of pragmatic approach. If it's stopping to give way to a school crossing patrol, we're not going to issue a PCN. So that's where the personal eye behind the camera is really helpful to be able to see what's happening at the time. And if we look at the next slide, we can also see what the operator sees in real time. So we can now have one civil enforcement officer outside 4 schools at once, and each camera can issue 3 penalty charge notices at once. So one CEO can issue 12 PCNs at once, something that is not possible clearly at the roadside. School enforcement is also very emotive when this civil enforcement officers are at the roadside. Drivers will often return, abuse, aggression, violence is offered, and a confrontational situation. The CEO can't then enforce to other vehicles or encourage other vehicles not to park. So this solution here kind of achieves far more than we've ever been able to achieve before in terms of compliance with these restrictions. If we can move on to the next slide, that tells us one CEO at 4 schools. Now this kind of started as a trial back in late 2019, and we started with 5 cameras. The success that we had in achieving compliance meant that councillors were really behind this, this subject and this topic. And after all, who's not going to support safety outside the school gates? So with that in mind, the project expanded and a further trial took place. And we're now up to 22 cameras, and our cabinet member came to the Digital Enforcement Hub, a purpose acquired building that we've had to have just to house this area of work, state of the art. We've got kind of screens all over the place and a dedicated team who are specialised in enforcing this alone. This work isn't done by a normal civil enforcement officer. The City Council has recruited specialist staff to do this. And here's just a shot of a couple of screens within the Digital Enforcement Hub. Now we can move on, and that's us winning the award in London last year, and a very proud moment. And we've got representatives from SEA there. So I think that's where we are in terms of that. I don't know if we've got any stats on the next slide. So here's the stats. So 4,249 vehicles were issued a PCN for parking outside the school gates on the zigzags in 2020. I'm not a naive man, but when we started this project, I didn't think that the school gate parking was going to be as bad as that. Over 4,000 people stopped on the yellow zigzags. Quite poor. When you compare that with what we achieved in education and driver engagement in 2019 using the camera car and foot patrols, we only issued 190 code 48 PCNs, the school gate parking. So you can see the massive difference in terms of the engagement we've been able to have with drivers between old methods and new methods. And then if you compare that on the next bullet point, when I did some number crunching, that would have taken us over 22 years to achieve what we achieved in 2020 had we not changed the methodology that we used. You know, quite remarkable, quite remarkable. Most importantly, it's demonstrated an increase in compliance at the locations that we've got the cameras at, and at one location as much as 81%. So the PCM figures, looking at those graphs that we're used to these days from the press briefings, the graph starts at the top in terms of PCNs and it drops down and it drops down and it stays down. And that is what this is all about. It's not about income generation or PCNs, it's about safety outside the school gates. And this product keeps that possible. And there's been a clear change in driver behaviour, which was unachievable using previous methods. So kind of concluding my bit really here from these slides, what we had before was functional, it wasn't efficient, it wasn't producing the best results. There was nothing on the market that suited us. We sat down with SEA, we came up with something, and this product here now is being used in different council areas up and down the country, and to a good degree of success. And we're really proud that that idea was born in Derby and is now being used elsewhere in the country. So that's it from me on that bit.
Brilliant, thank you, Rob. Looks really good actually, and I think the stats kind of speak for themselves, don't they, with the how it starts and utilising sort of an idea that was in Derby and promoting it and changing it to adapt to what's needed and so on is absolutely superb. And like I said, the stats kind of speak for themselves, don't they, with regards to enforcement. And I think the most important thing from that and the aspect of the compliancy is showing all the locations now. Can I ask, like, so when you go to a school and obviously school enforcement is needed outside that school, how does that work? So how do you locate the correct position for the camera? How do you put it up? Are they big? Are the cameras big? Are they visible? And how long do you enforce for? Is it one term, two, all year? How does that particularly work?
We've got a dedicated team now within the Digital Enforcement Hub who will go out and do site surveys and site visits and identify the locations for the camera. They will then speak with SEA and say this is where we think the camera should go, and our SEA contact will then come and have a look and see if they agree with that. So our specialist team will also go out. We've got staff trained to go up in a cherry picker now to put the cameras up and move them round. So those council staff from our digital enforcement team within parking services save money as well, so we're not paying a contractor to go out and move cameras. With camera enforcement, it can only be used where you can't achieve compliance using traditional methods. So it's really important that we keep a track on compliance, and where compliance improves, we then move the camera to a different location. But we don't just not enforce at that location then. What we do is move the camera car back to that location. So the enforcement will be done using another method, and then the digital enforcement team receive complaints that compliance has dropped, or the school gets in touch with us, we can consider moving the camera back. So it's about being proportionate, Darren. It's not about just leaving a camera up to kind of generate income. It's to say we've achieved a really good level of compliance here. Now let's look at moving it to a location where compliance isn't as good. But let's complement the removal of the camera by some of traditional methods used in 2019.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
School enforcement has always been a little bit unique, hasn't it, Rob? Where it's you achieve compliance, and then in September you get a whole new cohort join, and it's a bit like painting the fourth road bridge, isn't it?
Mm.
Have you found that you've got some really sort of poor locations that every September are at top of the list?
Well, it's still a kind of a fledgling system, so the data is quite raw. What we do is engage with the schools. Before putting a camera up, we'll send a newsletter to the school to let them know to put it in their newsletter to the parents. Our digital enforcement team, through Kerry and Leon, engage with the head teachers to tell them what the purpose of the camera is for, and to encourage their newsletters and their communication to parents. It's about prevention. We want compliance. We don't want them stopping on the zigzags. And anything we can do to kind of prevent that helps. I think what you've got to remember, though, these locations have been previously enforced using another method, so it's nothing new. So the parents can't say you've just started doing this, because we've always been enforcing. This is just a different method of enforcement. So we're not starting from a position of we've never done it before. We've always done it. This is just a different way of doing it. So which helps us. In the past, a couple of schools have raised concerns that we're kind of maybe making parking harder elsewhere because we're displacing parking. And my argument is that the zigzags were never a legitimate parking place in the first place. So we can't displace something that's not legitimate. The schools are absolutely behind what we're doing. We've set up a dedicated inbox for this area of work as well. And that inbox sees emails on a regular basis from schools saying, when is it our turn? It's managing demand, but not just managing demand within Derby City Council's area, in other council areas. I think I've done probably over 20 presentations to other councils on what this does, because of the kind of unique product it is, and also the results it gets. And, we're proudly assisting another council within the Midlands at the moment with 4 of our cameras on a commercial basis, where the recordings are taking place and monitoring is taking place in Derby for that council. And whilst PCNs aren't being issued at the moment, we're using the cameras to establish are the problems outside the schools for that council. Because if there are, then this product could be something that they want to look at. And in a two-month period for this council, at 4 locations, over 3,000 vehicles have stopped on the zigzags. you know, really poor
Major
compliance.
problem, yeah.
Yeah.
Which assists the parking manager in this authority to now have some real data, tangible data she can talk to her cabinet member about, say, we've got a real problem here. We thought we had a problem from the data we got and the complaints, but I can now tell you this is the problem. And I am absolutely confident by introduction of this product, they will also see that graph go down and down.
So just remind me, how many cameras was it you said, and how many schools are you sort of actively sort of covering with those?
We have 22 cameras at the moment, and there's 52 schools in Derby with a traffic regulation order. So there's 30 sites which are patrolled using foot patrols and our 2 camera cars, and 22 of them have got a static camera.
So the intention is to sort of generally try and cover all of them at some point, or if the need is there.
If the need is there, yeah. We've got another 8 sites waiting on the back burner at the moment for when compliance improves. And we look at compliance term on term. We don't make a decision based on one term. We look for consistency over 2 terms. And that demonstrates that, because really, what is an acceptable level of compliance? Some people could say 1's too many, but we have to be proportionate about it. And I think, you know, if we're down in the 1's and 2's per month, that tells us we can probably tackle that with a different method, and the camera might make that positive impact elsewhere.
Rob, you say you're helping obviously another local authority or different local authorities around the Midlands and around the country and so on. Can that be done from your digital enforcement hub? Because obviously not all councils would be lucky enough to be able to go sort of full on with a digital enforcement hub, which looks really good. And I mean, to be honest, I think most councils should probably have something like that are running. How does that work? How would that work for you
the
guys,
images,
for local authorities?
The images transfer back in over 4G. So from this authority, around 60 miles away, those images come back in 4G to our digital enforcement hub, and they can be monitored live. So it is as simple as that. You know, if you came in here and watched the cameras from this authority, you'd think they were just round the corner. There's no lag. The quality is absolutely perfect. But it's got to be borne in mind that we've not just arrived here today. A lot of hard work's gone into it, and there's been a lot of snagging along the way. But by us kind of investing in what we have done with SEA, it's meant that the product out there now on the ground is the best it can be. We are always looking for improvements where we can do. But it's you know, for other authorities, we can watch and monitor those cameras remotely, which saves them having to set up a hub themselves or staff it themselves. And we're purpose built to do that now here. So I think it's a real opportunity for other councils to tackle that all ever emotive issue of schoolgate parking.
No, definitely. I think sort of the time and effort, like you say, I mean, from 2019, we're 2 years now from that. The time and effort, I think, is undoubtable. Like, it's undoubted that, like I say, the locations, positions, and where they go, and time and effort, and signals, and so on, all need to be tested and run properly. What was the public response to this? Have you got much on? Obviously, the council back you up fully. Cabinet members, other local authorities, obviously, are clearly jumping for this as well. But what was the public response to this?
I think no one could not like schoolgate parking, Darren. You know, the enforcement of it, because it's with parking enforcement, people often look at it in a very dim manner. I was only 10 minutes late. I've only been a minute to go to the cash point. People have a bit of sympathy for those drivers who get caught. But people who stop outside the school gates, people don't like those kind of people. They see it as quite a serious and grave matter. So that's where we get the support. We have been very front and centre about it. It's not been hidden. The cameras have got white sleeves on them. They're very conspicuous. I went on Radio Derby to launch it on the breakfast show to tell the public of Derby what we were doing. We did a big feature in the local Derby Evening Telegraph. This isn't something that we wanted to hide. It's something we wanted to shout about. And we wanted to shout about it because we wanted to achieve better compliance outside the school gates. Moving forwards with school streets coming in and the moving traffic contraventions coming in, these cameras can also be repurposed to enforce those restrictions as well. So the City Council were looking at preventing vehicles from going down streets outside school gates when where schools are. We can use these cameras for that as well. So it's important to remember, you know, these cameras aren't just there for what they're doing now. They can be future-proof for other things as well.
I think using them, certainly to look at the viability and benefit of moving traffic, around yellow boxes is great. Can I just go back to sort of the hub and work with other authorities? So your role is to sort of prevent the evidence, and then that the other authority will pick that up from managing the PCN onwards?
Yeah, so for the authority we're working with at the moment, they're not issuing PCNs using our technology.
But if they were to?
Absolutely, yeah. We can either send it back to their system for them to review the evidence in-house and decide on a PCN should be issued or not, or we can make that decision here for them. All it means is we just have to change the certification we get from the Department for Transport, but it's a simple process. So we could all do it all in-house in Derby for them, or we can just do the actual monitoring and capturing of the evidence packs, and they can do the reviewing. So the local authority you're working for can choose as much or as little as they want to suit their own back office.
Are your experts going to go out and...
Yeah. Are you able to scale up the hub to?
Absolutely, yeah. Kerry and Leon, who manage the hub, they've got designs of moving up to 3 floors. And I think, it's a really ambitious idea. But something else that what we have done as part of the school safe havens is that sometimes you'll get cars stopping out the side of the school gates regularly, and we go off to DVLA and there's no trace, so we can't engage with that driver. The digital enforcement team are also based within our revenue protection team as well. They're based together. So if there's a vehicle which is always parking on the zigzags and it's coming back as no trace from the DVLA, our digital enforcement team and revenue protection officer will then go out, knowing that driver's movements and that they're likely to be outside the school in the morning or afternoon. They'll go out and try and directly engage with that driver. So first of all, tell them to stop parking there, and secondly, to advise them that they need to get the vehicle registered with the DVLA. And of course, whilst I'm here, we need to talk about the PCNs as well. So it allows a real joined up approach, and that's again an approach that we'd not had before, because if something comes back from the DVLA and it says we've got no trace, that's really difficult for the council to enforce, and we can't achieve driver behaviour change. So the two teams working together means that the left hand knows what the right hand's doing, and all of a sudden the driver at the roadside thinks the council are quite joined up here.
Excellent.
It all goes towards that compliance, doesn't it? Like everything comes together, and sort of like you say, the teams come together. Your way of working, your approach, and that really goes a long way into showing exactly what the stats are showing. Sort of your downward curve on PCNs, and then obviously compliancy goes in the opposite direction, which is the whole idea, isn't it? Going forward.
Absolutely, yeah, you're spot on.
Well, I think that's been really helpful, Rob. I know we've sort of worked alongside one another for many years, and you're always pushing the boundaries and looking outside the box. And I think you've sort of hit on a winner on this one. I think it's much needed sort of development, as I say, particularly moving towards moving traffic, where the opportunity to be even wider, and the benefits. I know this is particularly aimed at sort of school sort of safety, but my own personal belief is yellow box enforcement, when those powers come in, will have a huge impact on congestion and air quality, because I think they're some of the couple of changes of lights and blocking of yellow boxes can cause gridlock in a town centre. So I'm sure you'll be inundated with requests in not too distant future.
Kerry and Leon's team have already started scoping out all our sites in Derby have got moving traffic restrictions that we can enforce. So we've been out, we've checked all the regulatory signage, we checked if they're illuminated, we've checked any markings that are necessary, and we've identified 10 trial sites that we might be looking at putting 10 cameras at as and when the legislation comes online. And again, I think by being on the front foot there will help us assist other local authorities. And again, the grand idea might be to swell the digital enforcement hub, where some monitoring is done in Derby for other local authorities, because we're set up, we're the experts in it. So in the longer term, I think that's definitely something that we'd be keen to do. But it's the associated benefits, like you just said, Paul, about congestion, about clean air, and general kind of in areas in town centres and city centres, pedestrianised areas where at the moment vehicles can take a chance because the police don't have the staff to be able to deal with it very effectively. The city council dealing with it, or a county council dealing with it, will mean it's enforced far more rigorously, which will have a benefit for the city and the vibrancy of the city. Only a couple of weeks ago I was walking in the city centre, in a pedestrianised area, and there's a chap with a white stick being guided by somebody, and a car was just driving down towards them, and that's a pedestrianised area, and that driver will kind of just keep doing that, and that disabled person probably won't feel safe to come into Derby city centre again, and we can help stop that and change that driver behaviour. So I think the moving traffic will kind of, not just from an improved compliance point of view, but also help people's kind of public safety perception.
Great. Yeah, I don't think I've got anything else. Anything from you, Darren?
No, definitely. And just really finally, thank you, Rob, for thinking this way towards the parking industry and sort of taking the ideas and really sort of pushing them beyond sort of the normal everyday thinking, really, and promoting it and pushing it forward for other local authorities as well to take advantage of your forward thinking and leading the way.
And I think, certainly in Scotland, I did talk to the BPA Scotland Expo a couple of months ago, and these aren't powers that Scotland have got at the moment to be able to use cameras for this. Scotland found it really useful because it stimulates some thoughts for when they do get the powers. There's a ready-made solution in England. Let's just roll it out in Scotland. So it's learning from each other. And this is just where all the councils are kind of jumping on the back of what we've done, which is great because it all works towards making school gate parking safer.
Great. All right. Well, thanks very much for that, Rob. It's great to see you again, and hopefully we'll catch up in person in the not too distant future.
Yeah, lovely to see you both. Take care.
Thanks, Rob. All the best.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks. Bye.